Okay. Sorry, everybody. Welcome to Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg. Apparently, I'm having a delay. Welcome to the show. I'm Reverend Meg Biddle. You watched the show before. You know who I am. Let's just get to it. Let me say that I'm glad you're all here because today my guest is my friend and colleague who's coming wearing her author hat today. Author Melinda Mitchell. Welcome to the podcast.
Yay! Exciting to be here.
I need like to figure out how I can add like confetti cannon. That would be fun. So folks, she's here with a purpose, not just because she finds it fun to hang out with me. Although, if you haven't done your episode yet and you know who you are, anyway, so can I just say that this is Melinda Mitchell who has published her very first novel. Yay! Next of kin. I told her before we started that I had to stop reading because I was afraid I was going to blow it and give it all away. So the hope is that Next of Kin is book one in a series of many.
At least I think 4. That's what I'm planning. 4 books.
Okay, so for folks who may not know you, and 1, where they've been, and 2, don't know about the book, so then B, where have they been? Tell everybody about a little bit about you, about what you wrote.
Yeah. Most of you probably know me as Reverend Mindi Welton-Mitchell. I'm the executive minister for the American Baptist Churches of Wisconsin, but my author name is Melinda Mitchell, and I write science fiction and fantasy. And this is my first published novel. I do have a short story that's out. And of course, with my brilliant co-author, Paul Schneider, some of you know we have co-written 3 papers for the American Baptist Theologians Conference. 2 of them have had to do with science fiction and fantasy, specifically and intersections of theology. So that's kind of exciting. It's very fun to weave in interests like this and hobbies and passions into something like a novel. So Next of Kin is a retelling of the story of Ruth in space. It's a space opera. So think of, Star Wars, that sort of thing. But honestly, Next of Kin is probably more in line with Firefly. If any of you are fans of Firefly, you will recognize kind of the, being in the backwater part of the galaxy, the use of technology, the post-war kind of themes that are in Firefly are in Next of Kin. And so I'm excited that this book is coming out and being shared with the world.
Yeah, the Firefly description was really helpful for me. I mean, I watch sci-fi. That's like the thing I do with my husband, the Doctor Who, the Star Trek, and of course grew up on Star Wars and all that stuff. But to have that Firefly, because I'd also seen that once upon a time with him, was really helpful in like going, because you're going a retelling of Ruth in space, and you're just trying to like wrap your brain around what that might be.
Right. Yeah. Science fiction is such a broad genre. So this is not futuristic Earth, which Firefly is, but this is another galaxy, another setting. No real aliens. Everybody is human-like, but there are different worlds, moons, planets, systems, spaceships, languages, cultures, all sorts of things like that. And it's a story of a young widowed former soldier who has to travel across the galaxy with her mother-in-law to return to her mother-in-law's home, and is trying to leave her past behind, but it's never far
off. Paul, hey Paul, Paul's watching, and he made a little comment. You see that?
No, I'm not. I don't have the Facebook.
Oh, so he
Oh, there it is. Now I see it. It's text of Babylon 5. Yeah. It's been a long time since I saw Babylon 5. I actually was thinking a little bit more of Vipers from Battlestar Galactica. There's probably some Battlestar Galactica in this too. I would say that also influenced the background, especially the military background. There's some nods to Battlestar Galactica, I would say.
I find it really interesting that so many people can read it and get so many different things from it. I mean, it's just like reading the Bible. I mean, our
Right.
interpretation is very different. So pastor, executive minister, theologian, why sci-fi? Why Ruth? Why? I mean,
yeah.
How here.
So I'm one of those weird people who knew I wanted to be a pastor when I was 13, but I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was 8. And when I was 9, so when I was 8, I was writing short stories. And when I was 9, I actually won a school-wide poetry contest in the 4th grade. And so writing was always there. And then, you know, when I was 13, I felt this call to ministry. I never looked back. Again, one of those weird kids. But when I got to college, you know, I talked with my advisor and they were like, well, you could major in religious studies, but you will be taking a lot of those courses in seminary, you know, at a higher level. So what would you want to major in if you weren't going to seminary? And I said, creative writing. So I have a creative writing degree. And so writing has always been in the background. It's always been part of what I've wanted to do. But I will say that kind of fiction was pushed aside for about 10 years or so. I thought I would do more nonfiction. I have some essays in some different books, different imprints on parenting, parenting and disability, and some things like, you know, some topics like that. But about 10 years ago, I was reading a lot. That was when like Hunger Games was out and some other dystopian kind of fiction and science fiction. And I was like, I miss this. I miss getting into these kind of stories. And I started writing again. But I will say it was in seminary, so a little over 20 years ago, where I was talking with a group of friends, and we were talking about science fiction and stories, and we had a theology professor who was a huge sci-fi fan, and in fact, I wrote my final paper on eschatology as a sci-fi story, which I still have the short story, and I need to like work it out and try to publish it. My theology professor loved it, but I had this idea. I said, you know, Ruth would be an excellent sci-fi story, you know, a story of a young woman and her mother-in-law in the galaxy. I had a different vision of what it would look like at that time, but I had that idea over 20 years ago. And then when I started writing fiction, I dabbled a bit in fantasy, dabbled a bit in some other genres. And then in November 2016, I participated in NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, where you try to write 50,000 words in a month. And I wrote the first draft of What is Next of Kin in November 2016. And we might all remember what happened November 2016, like difficult time, you know, politically in this country. And I really saw the importance of a refugee story, especially with the legislation that came down in early 2017, you know, banning Muslim immigrants from certain countries. That's, you know, it was pretty targeted against a religious minority. I really saw the Book of Ruth as a way to see through that, to see, you know, through the negative and find, you know, a story of refugees and found family. And so the story became alive for me when I was revising it. And that's how Next of Kin came to be.
That you could write a draft of it in a month's time is kind of mind-blowing, at least.
Yes. And November is not the best time of year for pastors.
Right.
Right. I was blessed and fortunate at the time. I was in part-time ministry. And my son was in school full-time. So I did have time during the day to write. Like usually I usually worked Sunday through kind of Wednesday. And so Thursday and Friday were more writing days. So that helped at that time. It's been much harder to do NaNoWriMo ever since, but because I've been in full time since then. But I really saw this as an opportunity to tell a story. And one of the exciting things is when I was in college in my creative writing class, I actually took a class that was both in the religion department and literature department on C.S. Lewis, and learned about how C.S. Lewis was worried that the children of his day were kind of losing touch with the ancient myths and mythology, and also with the Christian story. So he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia to give children a mythology for their day. And then I learned that George Lucas was influenced by C.S. Lewis in wanting to give a mythology for his day, but he was more influenced by Buddhism and stealing from Japanese samurai shows and created Star Wars. And so I thought of myself in this kind of, I mean, not to like put myself on a pedestal with them, but in this vein of wanting to share the stories, our ancient stories, in a new way. And especially thinking about people who, have left religion, want nothing to do with religion, but here's something, what values do we still have from those stories? And obviously for those who are still in the church, this is going to be, a fun story where those intersections happen, but also for people for whom, they don't want anything to do with religion anymore, but maybe have some value in the stories that they were brought up with. And maybe finding, how can we tell these stories in a new way? So that's sort of the impetus for writing Next of Kin. Plus it was really a fun story to write.
So that was 2016?
So November 2016. And yeah, there's been 7 years.
Okay. So what's that? Was it more finding a publisher? Was it?
So it's writing is hard work. and I made a lot of mistakes early on. So I wrote the novel, I revised it, I had a couple of readers read it over, and then I started querying with literary agents. And my first query resulted in a full request, which is huge. And it was from a big name literary agency. So that kind of gave my ego a boost a bit. And I thought, I've got something here. And so it was rejected with some comments about that to help me to revise. And then I kept submitting it, but I kept getting either rejections or I'd get a request to do a revise and resubmit. So they saw some potential in the book, but they thought there were some structural issues. There were some character motivation issues, and they were right. But the problem is when you get so much input, then you start trying to write the story for other people. Mm-hmm. And so it really started becoming kind of messy. And then I sat down, so that was 2017 is when I started querying. It was 2019. I sat down with a literary agent who I knew, who was a friend, who said, this is a great story. I wouldn't know how to sell this to a publisher because I wouldn't know where to put it on the shelf. When you are going through the publishing process, literary agents want to be able to talk to editors of publishing companies and say, okay, this goes in this section of Barnes and Noble. Like basically think of the bookshelf and where it's going to go. And this story, while science fiction has a lot of elements of women's fiction, it's very centered on women. It's also got, sometimes I would query it and say it's a retelling of Ruth. Sometimes I wouldn't say that because I didn't want people to just mark this as Christian fiction. So it was hard. So I talked with this agent and she said, you're going to have a better luck with a small press, not one of the big publishing companies, but with a small press. And you don't need an agent for that. But a small publisher will be able to sell your book. You'll still be able to do it through independent bookstores and online. And they will have a better vision of how this book can get out there. So I started querying small presses. And in 2019, 2020, it was before the pandemic, I had worked with one small press. They had a different vision of how the book should look, different editorial vision, and I ended up deciding not to go with them. The second press I signed with in 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. And in 2021, the press closed. and that was really hard because I'd worked with a great editor, really had shaped the book to where it, was a much better book, and it closed. So then I tried a couple more small presses. I tried a couple of agents again. And sometimes you get to a point in the process where you decide to shelve a book, where it's like, this is not the right time for this book. This is not the right place. So you put it on the shelf. It doesn't mean it's dead. It just means it's not, sellable right now. So that's what happened. And I was, somebody on one of my Facebook friends had a similar issue, was posting about it. We were commiserating in the comments. And then a mutual friend said, hey, tell me more about this book. And this mutual friend has his own small press, Eris Entertainment. And that led to me emailing them the book, having a conversation, still doing some more edits. And you can see erisentertainment.com is where you can order my book from. So that was very exciting. It finally became a reality, and Eris Entertainment does science fiction and fantasy and horror. And so I'm very excited to join with this publisher, and the book releases tomorrow.
So this book that you have now is the book that you wanted to write?
Yes.
Is that safe to say?
Yes, this is the book this is the story I wanted to get out there. Editors help you with shaping that and help you get some of your facts straight and help you think through things, because sometimes I can be a big picture person. And, one of my editorial comments was like, you're thinking cinematography, you're thinking the big Death Star explosion. We need to know how that happens. We need to see, in the book, you've got to read, like, it just happened. Like, what is the events that lead up to that? Oh, right. I need to, like, and that can be one of my problems as a writer. Sometimes I visualize and I don't get it totally down on the page. So an editor helps you with that. Because sometimes your reader friends or, who are reading with you won't ask all the same questions. And I had actually been through an editorial pass before with my previous press, but my current editor was really good about getting into those details. And at first I was kind of frustrated. But then I realized he was right. So, yeah.
So these characters are they representation of real people in your life? Because I know everybody does this, but like in my head, you are the main character. I think because I know you. But that's immediately where I went was I made you.
So I would say no. But I would say there's elements of Ami, the main character, that I think there's some of her personality, a little bit of my personality that comes out, because I'm writing first person narration too. So that's a little bit, there's things that she says that are things that I probably say. And then there's things she says and does that are things I would never do. But I would say no. I would not say, I don't think any of the characters in the book are people in real life. I would not say that at all. They are the character. They are who I imagine. So the Naomi character is how I imagine the Naomi character in this setting, because it's different than the biblical story. There's some things that are changed, some elements, but it's how I imagine her. The Boaz character is how I imagine him in this world, in this story. So I would say there are more representations of biblical characters. And then there's characters that, are not in the biblical story that I've added in. There is one character in there that I don't want to spoil it too much, but the background of Ruth is the book of Judges. Especially in Christian Bibles, in Hebrew Bible, Ruth is with the writings, but in Christian Bibles, we placed Ruth between Judges and 1 Samuel, sort of as a palate cleanser, because Judges 21 is like the most graphic, horrific chapter in the entire Bible, pretty much. So one of the characters is dealing with the trauma of Judges 20 and 21. It's not on page, so you don't have to worry about that. But you get from the, it says that this character witnessed a lot in the war. And if you know your story, you'll know that they witnessed some pretty atrocious, awful things. And they're based off of somebody from the end of Judges. So that's where I went more for the writing of this story.
I think for me it was just easy to do that because if somebody actually has met you in person, you are so tall, and
Yes, her
I
height is my height. I did make Ami's height my height because it's easier for me
yeah.
to write.
So I don't know. I was just making you former military, so whatever.
Yeah, no, I did make her height my height because then it's easier for me to judge how to,
Yeah.
it's easier for me to judge space and like how this character will move and like, when they get injured, how it will feel, like that sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. I mean that makes sense. Um, so I told you that my kiddos had a question for you about your whole writing process, about how you how you name places and people. I mean, obviously with the retelling ish
Mhm.
of Ruth, you've got biblical nods in there that you pick up and you're like, I see it. And you really and I find myself smiling at those, when you pick up those. But like, how do you name planets and
Mhm.
all of that? How do you do that?
Yeah, so because this book is a retelling, there is a lot of biblical nods, and but even in some of my other works that haven't been published yet, I what I will do is sometimes take a biblical name and then just scramble the letters, um,
That makes
um,
sense.
or add a letter, or think about that, or I will take a name. So this is a character that appears in the first chapter, Shea. If you know the story of Ruth, Naomi, there was another sister-in-law, Orpah. Orpah in Hebrew it means neck. So what is neck in Russian? It's Shea. And so it made sense for the culture that Shea is from, that would be a name. Like if you read the book, you'll see like that would obviously be a name from that culture. So it worked really well. So sometimes I play around with language with, I mean, is a variation of Ruth in Spanish. I changed the spelling a little bit. So that's another way I have done it, is I will look at other languages and how the words can be translated. I do that more. I don't use a random name generator, although I have sometimes will go into like baby name to kind of generated to
Yeah.
see, and especially when I want to name in another language to see how it sounds or feels that would fit the culture that I am, because I'm making up a culture in the story, but I
Sure.
want to have nods and elements so that people recognize things in a way that's not appropriative. Obviously, you don't want to appropriate, but you want to bring in the diversity that we have on Earth into the worlds that you're building. And so
Awesome.
yeah. So I often look at what other languages and the words and names and cultures, and I do my best to learn the pronunciation. I don't always get it right. I did take 6 years of Russian, so I kind of know Russian better than other languages. Yeah.
Okay, there's your Jeopardy trivia for the day about Mindy. Uh, 6 years of Russian?
Yeah. Da, I should say. But I have not spoken it in a long time because I went to college and there wasn't Russian class in college. And then, in Alaska where I grew up, Russian's a good second language to have. It's not really in the rest of the continental US. So,
Right.
and over the years, I've had some German, biblical Greek, 8 weeks of Spanish. So my languages all get mixed up now, but I can still read the Cyrillic alphabet. Still, especially if I hear somebody talking, I can sometimes pick up, and if I read, I can understand. So I go to Russian a lot for names and places and stuff because I know um, the language. But
That's very cool.
mhm.
I like that. My youngest likes to do things like that. Is like, oh, I like what this means and this, and
Yeah.
play around with
And
that.
you can
So
also think of like, what are some, so in some other languages, you might have, I'm trying to think of there might be a kind of a pattern or repetition in certain names. So like in a fantasy book I was writing, I was thinking of a name that all these names would begin with like K and an apostrophe and then another name, sort of like the Vulcans use in Star Trek.
Yeah.
So you can play around with that, like taking names that we know and changing them slightly. So,
What was it about Ruth's story that you're just like, or Naomi? I mean, what was it about the Book of Ruth that you're like, this is the story that I need to tell?
yeah, I think it was really just the women centeredness of the story. It's two women. Um, mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationships are always fun. That there's dynamics there. And I really wanted to write a sci-fi story that was centered on women, centered on what they have gone through as survivors, and just really focused on that. And I just really enjoyed the dynamic of the story. And when I first wrote it, I wasn't planning to write more. And Next of Kin itself is a closed story. Like there'll be a book. I'm planning a book after it, but it will not have those characters in it.
Okay.
The next book I'm planning is a series with David. So this would be like a prequel, a few generations before, if that happens. So how that will happen is if people buy my book and read my book and leave good reviews on Amazon, especially, and on Goodreads. The more hype about the book, the more sales about the book will lead to possibly doing the second book. So,
and while we're there, why don't you just go ahead and like give us the down low on where you can buy?
Yes. So erisentertainment.com, my publisher's website, is the best place to buy. If you're one of the people who pre-ordered, I was told today by the publisher that those pre-orders are going out this week. Tomorrow is release day. They will be going out. They will be shipped this week for the print copies. Obviously, ebook, Kindle, you'll get those as downloads. You can also order it from Barnes & Noble. So you can go to barnesandnoble.com and order it. You can go into the bookstore. What I would suggest is look it up online and then go to them and say, hey, it shows that you carry this book, but it's not in the store. Can you get some copies in the store, or can you order me a copy? But you can also order it direct from them. And then Amazon has Kindle right now for pre-release through tomorrow, and should have the print soon. The other thing you can do is go to your local independent bookstore. I really like this idea. Go to your local independent bookstore. Say you want to order this book. You can show them the listing from Amazon or Eris Entertainment or Barnes & Noble. They should be able to find it. Ingram is the printer for most books, and so it's listed. They should be able to find it. Another thing you can do is your local public library. Request the book there. That's a great option, especially if you are not sure you'd want to keep the book, if you're not somebody who keeps books, or you don't have the money. Library is a great way, and it's a great way to make sure the book gets shared beyond you. So those are the ways to order the book.
How cool it'll be to like have the book and then go, okay, now sign my and to be like, I know her, like,
Yeah.
here, let me text her.
Yeah.
Finding you on the shelf and all of that, taking your picture and going, look what I found.
Yeah. So those who watch this show who are related to, who know about American Baptists, Space for Grace is coming up in April, and I will be there. And I will bring copies with me. I just sent an email this morning asking if I can do a signing. So I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't expect to know the answer yet, but I'm going to bring books with me. So
awesome. Wait, we were talking about another podcast. You said something about you did another podcast? Or?
Yes, I recorded a podcast. It's called Writers Not Writing, and it's produced by Not a Pipe Publishing, which is another small press, and it will go live 9 p.m. Pacific tonight, so midnight Eastern. So I'll be sharing it tomorrow. But I was on Writers Not Writing on Saturday and had a blast with Benjamin, who's the producer of that show. And we talked about a lot of things we do when we are not writing, what distracts us from writing. So it was kind of fun. Talked about some of the books I'm reading, some of the things I dream about. talked about current politics and things, and it's very interesting. But we did talk about next of kin, and so you'll hear about it on
That
that
is
podcast.
one of the questions. It's like, what are you reading right now?
Oh, I am reading. So I have a lot of author friends who all had books come out. So I am reading. I didn't bring it in the room with me. I should have. The Coop Your Belt Job by David Levine, which is it's basically an Ocean's 11 in this solar system, getting the gang back together to break somebody out of jail. So I just started that. And then I will be reading Uncanny Vows, which is the sequel to Uncanny Times, which is sort of a paranormal story. It takes place in 1913, brother-sister detective team who hunt monsters. And it is written by my friend Laura Ann Gilman. And so her book just came out. Yeah, it's awesome. So I'm reading those right now. I did just finish reading Patrick Stewart's memoir, Make It So, which is really fun. If you are a fan of Patrick Stewart, it is a good book. And he talks about some of the mistakes he's made in his life, and is pretty honest about places where he's gone, he's married 3 times, and he talks about, mistakes he made in his previous marriages. And he talks about things he regrets, ways that he acted towards others. But I think it's a very candid, real memoir about life. And so that was fun to read. And then I have a lot of my to be read pile is huge.
I was gonna say, if somebody's ever looking for a book to read, just ask Mindy.
I've got lots of books. I've read a lot. I still have a lot to read. So
I mean, occupational hazard, but also I think that's one of the great things about having a job where you are people that you just have conversations like this. Like, what are you reading?
Yeah, and I do read theology. I do read books on church, adaptive change, church today, all that kind of stuff, because I do need to read that for my role. But I also find there's so much. This is why I wrote Next of Kin. There are truth in the stories that we, when we read fiction, we learn more about ourselves. And that was the paper that Paul and I co-wrote about The Future Is Now, about, thinking about the future of religion through near future science fiction, and what does it teach us. And what we discovered is, in looking at kind of mainstream near future science fiction like The Expanse, Firefly, and some other shows, we see that there are clergy, there are religious groups, there's still congregations, there's still people seeking spiritual, they're still searching for God. We don't see as much of the institution in the future. And so what does that teach us about our institutional ways? And I think that's very fascinating. As somebody, I often go into my churches as a regional minister and say, I represent the institution and I'm skeptical of the institution. And I hold those in balance, and see that things are shifting and changing. And I think fiction really helps us to imagine what that can look like, how it can look differently. That's really, it's really like using our imagination as a gift for seeing what we are called to do and who we're called to be going forward.
What did you learn about yourself in this process?
Oh my goodness.
I didn't warn you about that one, but that one just like.
You didn't tell me you're going to ask that question. That's a good. I think what I learned is, especially in writing and a book that's been in process for 7 years, I've learned that I'm stubborn. I've learned that I like to complain a lot and say I'm giving up, I'm never doing this again, and then I get back to it. I've learned that one of the things I've really had to learn, and I think it's very interesting, is, and this is something that pastors have to learn and writers, is how to take constructive criticism well, and how to let go of what is not constructive. When it's not constructive, it usually is not about you, in both writing and ministry. Amen. It's usually, somebody is, when somebody says something horrible about your book in a way that's just demeaning, and it's about them. It's not about you in the writing. When somebody says this doesn't work for me because of this, you pay attention and you go, okay, this didn't work for them. Why? And it might be, Same thing in a sermon. Like, if somebody says, I didn't understand what the point you were trying to make, you'd want to pay attention to that. That's not oh, you're a terrible pastor, and it's okay, something disconnected here. It still may be the reader or listener's issue. It may not be mine, but I want to listen and pay attention to that. Or if somebody says, what you said really hurt me, you want to pay attention to that. It still may not be your intention, but you want to, it takes some kind of stepping back and going, okay, this isn't really about me, but what can I do better? And really, and I think sometimes that's hard as a pastor, to do. I was in pastoral ministry for 20 years, and it's hard as a writer to do at times, to take that step back, but you learn from it. You learn from that process, and you learn, okay, I need to change my sermon approach, or I need to change my writing approach, or I need to, one of my biggest problems probably in writing is world building, in terms of, I see the picture in my head, I got to get it on the page. I got to ground the scene. I got to make so people will see it. And obviously readers, we're all going to experience it differently and see it differently, because we imagine, it's the same thing when you read a book and then it becomes a movie and you go, that's not how I imagined it. Well, that happens, but you want to give them something. And if you don't start in with anything, you have to ground the scene. So that's something I'm still learning and still working on in my writing process, because I jump right into the story, into the action and plot, and sometimes forget, no, I need to take a step back. Same thing with the sermon. You got to give a little bit of background. You got to give the scripture background.
Do you ever create like an actual physical visual of what you're?
So in fantasy, I've drawn maps. They are very terrible maps. I've drawn maps to get myself, thinking of that. In sci-fi, I actually did have to. There's I don't want to give too much away again, but there's a scene where I actually did have to sit down, sketch out, like, okay, how would the ship look? How would the fighter planes fit in here? What is this? And think about, like, okay, I've seen Battlestar Galactica. I've seen, all these space, Star Wars, Star Trek, Babylon 5. It's been years since Babylon 5. But, all the shows I've seen, and think about, okay, how does that work? All right, so how would it look in this universe, so that I can describe it? Like, I'm still not getting down to like all the dirty details, but enough that the reader can picture it and move forward. So I will sometimes do that. Like I said, writing Ami and making her my height was easy, because then I can just, okay, this is like, when she has to, she's thinking she might have to duck through a passageway on a ship. She's remembering how it was when she was a soldier. And I can imagine that, because I have been on airplanes where I've had to duck. my spouse, who is taller than me, has to duck a lot. So those are the things I think about.
Yeah. And I think you do a terrific job in just giving us a visual, like you can go there in your head, just simply from, again, not giving too much away, but going from like your bunker where you're safe, to going from your ship where you're headed to your next destination. And when you're talking about like the food, the difference in the food, and you're picturing like that horrible, that they were having this might be truly horrible if we were eating it, but because it's this much better than this, you can go there. And I think you do a great job with your description. So, like, folks, get the book, read the book, share the book. I'm excited to go and finish it.
And when people finish it, please do go on Amazon. Even if you didn't buy the book on Amazon, but go, if you have an Amazon account, go on Amazon, give it a good rating. Be honest. I don't want people to lie. I'm still pastor, but give it a review, because the more reviews, the more, ratings, it will get more sales and get more attraction. And do that on Goodreads as well.
Is it better for folks to buy it on the Ars Entertainment, or
it's always better to buy direct from the publisher? But I will say right now, if you are listening to this today, December 11th, 2023, and you want it in time for Christmas, you might want to order from Barnes & Noble or Amazon. But if you don't care about getting it in time for Christmas, or if you're ordering it as ebook, it's gonna come automatically starting tomorrow. But generally speaking, order from Eris Entertainment. That will be the best for all of us.
Are you
Support your small publishers? Support your small bookstores. Yes,
absolutely. Are you an ebook, or are you a real book, physical book?
I'm a both. I'm a both and.
Okay.
I have a lot of physical books. I am leaning more towards physical books because you can get them signed. You can get, there's just the way a book feels, the print, the text looks different. But I do get ebooks. Sometimes, I mean, to be quite honest, they're often cheaper. It's, easier to carry around, but it also is, I hate to say this because yes, ebooks are real. That's my publisher.
I know that one.
Ebooks are great, and I do have a lot of ebooks, and I read both. And I do like the ebooks because it is easier to find, especially if you're looking for a scene or especially my nonfiction highlighting, finding stuff. It's much easier to find, but I also love having the physical book. So I'm a both and.
Okay. So for those who are, whether you're listening or watching, Mindy, if you want to send me the link to your other podcast, I will.
Yeah, that will be out tomorrow. So yeah.
And we'll make sure that we put your Eris Entertainment, anything else that you come up with. I'm happy to share it. Paul says, oh, plus copy paste for quotes. Yeah, Paul, I get that. Copy paste for quotes for your ebooks. But I prefer most of the time to have the physical book. Like if it's something for school that I don't think I'm going to use again, probably, then I'll go ebook. But I like the book. I like the idea that maybe I will meet the author someday and sign it, kind of thing.
I think there's an app now for Kindle. I've seen something where you can do digital signatures, so you can still collect signatures for your books. Yeah, I've seen that somewhere. And the other thing is I can also make bookmarks and I can sign them and give it to you, and you can have something goes with your ebook. But yeah, I think there might be an app now because I saw somebody in a signing who had that. And I was like, oh, that's very cool.
They buy their book now, they read it, they love it, they do the review, they bring it with them to Space for Grace, and you'll also sign it.
Yes, absolutely. I will sign them at Space for Grace. And and that's also the other thing is you can also, sometimes I buy the ebook and I buy the print book, and then I can give the print book away to somebody else who hasn't read it yet, and I still have my copy. You can always do that.
This is just like incredibly exciting. I mean, going you in this whole process and then this thing that you have birthed is now like I have seen the whole thing and other people have finished the whole book and it is coming,
it's very exciting. It's very exciting. I've been very nervous going, I hope people like it. So far I've heard good things, so that's helpful. But
so I'm excited to finish it up and do all the good reads and all the things to just like be like, hey, listen, my friend read a book and it's fantastic. So when we're looking for this book, we look under sci-fi, we look under
sci-fi, science fiction. Look up Next of Kin, Melinda Mitchell. Unfortunately, Next of Kin is a popular title, and Melinda Mitchell is also, there's some other Melinda Mitchells out there. But if you look up Next of Kin, Melinda Mitchell, it's the first book that comes up.
I'll find links and put them in the show.
Yeah, we've got links. There's if you actually go to my website, melindamitchell.com, click on books at the bottom, I have links to Eris Entertainment, Barnes & Noble, Amazon right there.
Okay, cool. So I know you've done the show before and answered the question, but I'm still going to ask the question about joy.
Oh yeah.
What's the thing that brings you joy?
Oh goodness. I mean, I love reading a good book.
Mm.
Joy right now has been so my family, we do Advent at home every night, and we turn electronics off, we light the candles, we do a little devotional. And my son AJ, some of you know AJ, he's autistic and nonverbal. He loves Advent and Christmas, but he really wants his chocolate, and he has to wait till we're done with the devotional and sing a couple songs. But we have this nice, like, cozy Advent time, and
Mm.
I love Advent more than Christmas. I just like that kind of the ritual of waiting and the lighting the candles. So it brings me a lot of joy because we do more family things. Yes, some of you also know my spouse is a baker and pastry chef, and I said, "Hey, what are you going to do with those 6 Granny Smith apples that are just sitting there?" And he made a pie. Um, he'd been planning to do it, but I kind of pushed him to make it yesterday. So it's baking season in our house, and it's cozy season. That brings me a lot of joy, just spending time with my family. It's fun. My husband and son.
So when someone asks you run into somebody and they say, um, what is Next of Kin about? What's your brief? Like, do you just say it's a sci-fi retelling of Ruth? How would you, we
So,
meet, you're like, what's
yeah,
the
yeah. So if there's somebody in the church world, I'll say sci-fi retelling of Ruth.
book?
If they are in the literary world, I'll say it's a women-centered space opera about a young widow traveling across the galaxy with her mother-in-law, and that usually is intriguing too. So to people,
Okay.
yeah.
And it's a book that really is for anyone, Christian, non-Christian,
Right, right.
you
It's
know.
it's not really. I mean, I would say there is an element of faith that's part of Ami's journey, but it's not meant to be a religious book. It's not.
Okay.
It really is meant to be a story about how do we make meaning in terms of horrific loss, and especially I think
Mm.
coming out of the pandemic, coming out of whenever whatever's going on for people's lives, it's how do you move forward, how do you make meaning, how do you and not totally letting go of the past, because I think that's, I like, again, don't want to give too much away, but that the past always stays with us, and so how do we make meaning of that and carry it forward. It's also, I think very strongly kind of an anti-war, anti-violence book, even though there is war and violence. I think it's also a story about found family, and I think that really appeals to a lot of people these days. So that's what I hope people find from it is a sense of hope and how to start again, or how to make meaning when you have suffered horrific loss.
I think that's perfect. I really do. Um, Even though I haven't read the last couple of chapters, still, I think that's a perfect description of the book. But again, I am biased and I'm okay with that. Um, so, um, congratulations, first of all.
Well, thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you so much,
Um,
Meg.
this is so exciting, and thank you for doing the show again. I know, like, you try and keep up with Paul, who has been on the show. You know, he was actually in the last episode.
Yeah, he
Um,
was on a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
yeah. So, I'm grateful for you and your many ministries. And I hope that folks will go and pick up,
Yes.
order Next of Kin,
Please,
and
please
enjoy.
buy Next of Kin. And I also think it's a really good book if um it's the kind of book that you can give somebody who maybe is not sure about religion, or has left and stuff, but it's also the kind of book where if you are somebody who is not religious but you still have religious family members, you can say, hey, this is why I like science fiction, and give it to them. I don't
Yeah,
know. It's a book that should appeal broad audiences, and it
yeah,
has, I think, like I said, I think it's a story of faith, but in a broader context, a broader understanding of kind of faith in ourselves, faith in each other, and yes, there is still an element of God in the background, or some sort of universal force that binds us together.
No, I agree. I agree.
But it's
So
yeah.
thank you for doing this, and I'm excited to see it just take off, and for the next book.
Yeah. So well, I'm working on the next one. We'll see how this one sells, and everything, and hopefully this will be a series. That would be.
I hope so. Yeah. I think it's just lovely and brilliant. So, folks, thanks for joining us here with author Melinda Mitchell, also Reverend Mindi Welton-Mitchell, executive minister of the great state of Wisconsin. And yeah, so proud of you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And thanks for letting me share this, because it's been on my board since you told me about it. So
Yay! Thank you,
so,
Meg. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Yeah, and for everybody listening, watching, put all the fun links in there, to all the places, and go buy the book.
Yes.
Christmas presents. So
yes.
Again, thank you so much, and thank you all for watching and listening.
All right. Take care.